Hey everybody, how are you? Mandy Baby 18 here. How's everyone doing? I hope you had a good holiday. I did. I spent it with my family and enjoyed it very much. I cooked, of course, so I was a bit tired out, to say the least. And part of that reason is I didn't tell you yet that I have lupus. And I'm sure more people have heard of lupus by now because of Selena Gomez, for one. She came out with it and she ended up having a kidney transplant, and it was very public. Luckily, so far, my organs are good, knock on wood. um, but yeah, I was diagnosed in 2012 with it. And after that, so far, my health isn't the greatest, but it's not bad. I mean, considering. And I take it every day. We all take it day by day. So, you just have to learn to live with the things that come your way and make the best of it. And, I have other ailments from it. Uh, I have extremely bad arthritis in my knees, like they are shot. And, you know, I was a wild child, as you'll find out later. So, I was always abusing my body, climbing trees, falling, running, you know, uh, lots of that interesting stuff. I had lots of stitches and a broken bone, and yeah, I was doing. One of my big things was roller, and I would come home with big bruised up knees, and my mom would be like, "Why are your knees so bruised? Are you falling all the time?" Uh, yeah, kind of. Um, we'll go into that later, but yeah, so I bruised up my knees a lot, and my mom would always say, "You're gonna ruin your knees. You're gonna ruin your knees." And when you're young, you are like, "Yeah, right," because you feel so invincible, and you can do anything, and your body can take it. Well, let me tell you, it's gonna catch up with you, and it caught up with me. So, yeah, yeah. So now we're gonna go back instead of forward. And I'm going to go into my grandparents on my father's side first. So, on my father's side, I have, let's see, I have French and German, and I have uh, Italian, which I'm mostly Italian on his side. I have maybe Greek and Balkan, and Ashkenazi Jewish, and Egyptian and Levantine, which I have that, but it's only a tiny, tiny little bit. Maybe we all have a little bit of that. Um, so it was said that my grandmother, well, I have a little bit, you know, I should say, and North African. My grandmother was said, my father always told us she was Russian um, and Jewish and um, Italian was from his father's side, and we knew we had French and German from him. So anyway, we thought she came from Russia, and then we found records that she came from Poland, but we're not Polish, so I don't really know where they get that from. But anyway, she came over to the United States, and she came with her aunts, and then she got married young, and she got pregnant, and he went into the service, I believe. Anyway, the aunts did not approve. Her aunts did not approve of him, and they were against the marriage. So, anyway, the rumor is that they convinced her to get divorced and put the baby up for adoption, and the baby's name was Sarah. So, my grandmother put her first child up for adoption. I don't know how she did that. How it really bothered her later on. I heard stories of how it bothered her and how she wanted to find that child and make sure that child was okay. She really, I don't think, wanted to do it. But times were different then, and there were a lot of children that were put up for adoption or put in orphanages, and a different time, very different. So anyway, Sarah got adopted, and then my grandmother met my grandfather. My grandma was Anna, and my grandfather was Leonard, and they met, and they had a bunch of kids out of wedlock. And the only thing I could figure is maybe the divorce didn't go through yet, just like my parents. So history kind of repeated itself. And um, they had, let's see, two, three, four, five, six. They would have had 7 children together. The first, well, no, 6 children together. The first one was Sarah, who was adopted out, right? Oh no, I didn't can't count Sarah. So yeah, they had 7 children, and Sarah was the one that was adopted out from the first marriage. So my grandmother would have had 8 children. So you can hear the dog, one of the dogs barking in the background, a little yappy dog who always barks. So um, anyway, Sarah was adopted out. So my grandfather and grandmother had 2 girls, and then my father, and then another girl, and another boy, and then a girl. The last girl um, passed away at a year old. I found that in records, and we didn't even know about her. And of course, my father was just a little kid, so he didn't remember. He kind of said that there was another child that passed away, but he was so young, he barely remembered it. But yeah, there was one called Dorothy who passed away, and at a year old. So um, I guess my grandfather was always into being a machine broker and into machining. And somehow he got involved with the mob. And he was part of the mob, which I found out kind of later. And I never really knew until I was older. Um, but when he was part of the mob, he had moved to Michigan and he was using a different name. Um, and I don't know what that was all about, but that's when Dorothy was born and only lived a year, and all the other kids were already born. So, anyway, then they moved back to where they were from, and eventually, not too long, they didn't spend much time in Michigan, and they moved back to where they were from. And I guess my grandfather was still involved in the mob, and was, as far as I know, most of his life, probably all of his life, as the mob goes. And I know that he wanted my father to get involved, and he tried to get my father involved. And that's when my father was old enough to break off into his own machine company and say no to his father. He didn't want that part of life. He didn't want to be in the mob. So he broke off from the mob and had his own business. And it was a rough go for many, many years, but he didn't want that in his background. My father was a different guy than his father, and my father was a very sweet, loving man, and I guess he had his mother's genes because, from what I hear, my grandfather wasn't so, great. Um, but I wasn't here to know him. He passed away before I was even born. But anyway, so I didn't know they weren't married until after they had all their kids. I don't even know my father knew that because I didn't find that out until, Ancestry came around and my father was long gone, by then. And so I don't know if he ever knew, but he always looked for his sister, his half sister that was adopted out. But I'll tell you why. So when my grandmother was 32 and had all of her kids already, she got sick. and they think it was tuberculosis, but they never found out. Um, she was coughing terribly and spitting it in newspaper, crumbling it up, and telling her kids, "Don't touch it, just burn it." And back in those days, that's something they did when they had tuberculosis. And so perhaps that was it, but she passed away when my father was only 12. And being the second man of the house besides his father, he had to quit school and go to work at that age. And so he started working at 12 and quit school. He had no choice. He had brothers and sisters that he had to support. Women didn't work, and the men always worked. And he had a younger brother, and he couldn't work yet. And so my father had to work at a very young age and had no schooling. But my father made something of himself, and we'll talk about that later. But yes, his mom passed away, my grandmother. So obviously, none of us knew her. And my grandfather didn't consider remarrying, but that was wrong. We'll talk again. Take care, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.